I'm glad it's Saturday. As a small child, Saturdays always left the biggest impressions on me. It was my mum and I, and we had to do two things: get my hair cut and then go to the market for groceries. So I didn't always love our Saturday rituals, but in hindsight, I recognized that those were my first experiences of art. We'd be riding the 53 bus through South London on our way to the barber's. My mum, peering through the window, would sigh and then comment as we'd pass the charred scars from the fire at that house party in 1981 that killed 14 black teenagers. It was widely believed to be a racist arson attack. Racist graffiti was not uncommon in our streets, so there was always this feeling within the community of a need to have safe spaces. We'd arrive at the barber's. Unique hair technique by Patrick was the hand-painted sign. In black culture, this is where the community gathers. You get your hair did, and then you connect with like-minded people. Inside the barber's, African and Caribbean men of all ages, deep in conversation, sat on wooden benches waiting their turn. Above the mirrors, there was this collage of colorful banknotes that reminded me of stained glass. Each of these notes had been handed to Patrick by his customers on their return journeys from far-flung places. There'd be wafts of cologne and talcum powder in the air, whilst there was this constant commentary from the radio. And on the front window, there was these red metal grills, Patrick's unofficial insurance policy to protect the investment he devoted his life to. Now, I often wonder if Patrick really understood what he'd created. This wasn't your regular barbershop. Yes, it was a grooming station, the heartbeat of the black male community, but this was something different. Patrick had designed this space, and it felt more like an installation. We'd leave the barbers and make our way down to Deptford Market, which was essentially a weekly, unscripted performance art piece. All nations would descend to haggle for groceries and bargains, different people groups that would contrast or complement one another. You'd have the heavy drinkers down by the anchor, sipping Red Stripe and singing, while shopping trolleys just wheeled past. You'd have the loud, rhyming slang of the stall holders who'd be twirling brown paper bags filled with fruit. As a kid, I found this highly entertaining, whilst my mum, she was the height of embarrassment. She would be questioning the quality of the vegetables while she was busy squeezing it. So looking back and treasuring those everyday moments, if we allow culture to show us the beauty that exists in each other and our environments, we allow ourselves to be able to see things in a new way. As an artist, I often question and I challenge the inherited rules which tell us what has value and what does not. And in my work, I'm looking to recreate those tactile feelings of my childhood, those unfiltered references of identity that are so powerful that they can disrupt the boundaries between fear and community and blur the lines between culture and art. Now, 8 years ago, I stumbled on a photo online of a lady standing next to a stack of colorful bags. I loved the vibrancy and the graphics, even though I didn't know what they were. I contacted a friend of mine, Yaira, based in Ghana, who runs an upcycling business in an area called Cantamanto, which is a vast, sprawling market that gets filled with a deluge of second-hand goods deposited by the global north. Yaira found a man in the market selling used packaging, and the bags that I'd admired turned out to be discarded rice sacks. When the stacks arrived, I created collages and backdrops and made some stylish totes. And the totes became an instant talking point with whomever had one. Repurposing material into something desirable and function gave me the opportunity to begin to make art from culture. Now, there's an African proverb which says, until the lion is allowed to tell his story, the hunter will always be the hero. So in my work, I often take the role of the lion, sharing stories often left untold. 12 years ago, I collaborated with photographer Dean Chalkley on our first large-scale exhibition titled Return of the Rude Boy. Now, what is a rude boy, many of you might ask? Wikipedia will tell you that rude boys were street hoodlums in Jamaica in the 1960s, but the context that Wikipedia doesn't give you is the rude boy that we framed in our exhibition. In the 1960s and 70s, Jamaican rude boys to white working-class youth symbolized a kind of freedom. Their independent spirit, their swagger, and their style was the epitome of cool. Rude boy characteristics, impeccable tailoring, shaved heads, and a no-nonsense attitude was an inspiration to mods, skinheads, and later punks. In the 70s, there were a number of skinhead reggae albums made, and bands like The Specials and The Selector were inspired by ska and reggae. And the punk band The Clash worked with Jamaican producers and also used rude boy references in their music. We wanted to highlight the importance of rude boy contributions on British culture. We felt that London's Somerset House was the perfect venue for this. Now, originally, Somerset House wasn't a gallery. Back in the 17th century, Somerset House was home to the British Admiralty, whose involvement in the transatlantic slave trade is undeniable. So the ability to start reclaiming that space to tell powerful Black British narratives meant that new souls would be able to inhabit those rooms. One day, I was sat in the exhibition minding my own business, and this guy came up to me and he was all in my face. "What do you think you're doing? You cannot sit there. Don't you know this is art?" I loved how protective he felt. And I'd never been so pleased to be told off in my life. This unknown guy felt such a sense of belonging. In his mind, he couldn't understand why I was disrespecting the art. Now, his reaction, among the 65,000 others that visited the exhibition, showed me that the way that we create narrative has a future. So now, when I create narrative, I can't control what will happen, but I know that if I am true to my artistic and cultural references, those that I hold really dear, audiences feel something, and that feeling stays with them. Last year, I collaborated with hairdresser Johnny Sapong on a series of installations in London and Paris entitled Le Salon, The Art of Conversation. So with Patrick's barbershop in mind, I collaged the walls with vintage African record sleeves, textiles, paintings. There was a stylized market stall, and we centered a barber's chair. Having your hair cut was totally optional. We invited people to talk, to play vinyl, and some people literally began to dance. It's true, they did. At our last opening, Lorraine, a prominent art critic, intrigued by our installation, introduced herself to Don, the tall, elegant Rasta that was busy grooming someone's hair. Soon into their chat, they realized that they were neighbors. Lorraine had walked past Don's salon for years, but had never noticed it. Don said to Lorraine, he asked her if she'd known an old friend of his who had died, but had lived on the same street as her. Lorraine began to sob. In that moment, time stood still. Don's old friend was Lorraine's estranged father. Now it is highly implausible that a Rastafarian and a Thatcherite Tory MP in the 1980s would have had anything in common. Yet Don's curated salon and his sense of community meant that Lorraine's father found a sense of belonging in Don's space. The author Cesar A. Cruz has a quote and a challenge, which I take and I reference, which is, art is there to disturb the comfortable, but it also should be there to comfort the disturbed. So in that moment, if no one else had entered Le Salon for the coming days, it wouldn't have mattered to me, because it felt like true human connection had ignited in a space that we'd created, and it felt like art had held hands with culture. So I challenge myself these days to create culturally rich visual narratives that can hold pockets of connection with the audiences that I invite into my world. Memories of swinging my legs on a wooden bench as a child in Patrick's barbershop, being totally absorbed in multicultural art, or being immersed in the chaos of market culture are so precious, but not exclusive to me. But how about you? You? What are some of your most vivid and precious memories? I'd love you to take a moment and think about some of the memories, some of the people, some of the environments that have had a profound impact in you and in your life. Because when we allow the beauty of culture that exists all around us, we allow it to disrupt the preoccupied thoughts that exist. We can open portals that allow us to have a much deeper connection with each other. Thank you.